I want to thank you for being here. Hope this will be very informative for you and helpful for you in your studies of God's Word. And if you will, bow with me for just a moment. From studying first century Jewish sources and from the New Testament itself, we can easily see that the rabbis of the first century had a twofold division of time. You'll see it on this chart here, this age and the age to come. And the rabbis talked about those two different ages, and they also inserted a transitionary period between those two ages called the days of the Messiah. And you'll notice I've charted it out a little differently than the rabbis would. This is the way our New Testament charts it, as opposed to the way the rabbis would have charted it. But the point is that our New Testament follows that basic rabbinical pattern that was there with some slight changes and adjustments for the truth, of course. And so there's this age. You'll see this mentioned in the Old Testament as the Olam Hazeh, and the age to come is referred to as the Olam Haba. And between these two ages, they placed the days of the Messiah, a special period of time in which the Messiah would appear to close out the old era of the law and usher in the new world of the kingdom of heaven. And rabbis differed regarding which age to place the Messianic period. And they also differed about how much better things would actually be during those Messianic days as opposed to how they would be in the age to come. And they also differed in regard to how long these Messianic days would last before the age to come arrived. And my second lesson tomorrow will deal with that 40-year transition period called the days of the Messiah, so I'm not going to deal with it much here. The best one-volume Reader's Digest version of the rabbinical writings, if you're a lazy person like me and like the Reader's Digest, the best one-volume comprehensive study of the Talmudic writings is Every Man's Talmud. We have copies of that available back on our book table if you'd like to get a copy of it. It's an easy, cheap way to study the Talmudic writings. Many rabbis, and I'm going to quote here from page 356 of Every Man's Talmud. He says this: many rabbis believed that the period of the Messiah was only to be a transitionary stage between this world and the world to come, and opinions differed on its duration. The rabbis debated the timing and the sequencing and content of this messianic period called the days of the Messiah. So it shouldn't surprise us if Christians have difficulty understanding it as well. When I studied Talmudic writings under the Orthodox rabbis in New York City, one of them joked about how challenging it was to find two rabbis who agreed with one another. He said that if there were 50 rabbis in a room discussing a certain topic, there might be 51 opinions, and none of which could be the true, correct one. I find it interesting that Jesus and our New Testament writers follow this same two-age model of redemptive history fairly closely and place the days of the Messiah in the middle between the ages. That's the topic that we're going to be discussing today, between the ages, speaking of the transition period. They place this days of the Messiah in between this age and the age to come. But they differed as to whether it was the last part of this age or whether it was the first part of the age to come. Jesus and New Testament writers resolved that debate creatively by declaring both of those positions right and both of them wrong, because they show that the two ages actually overlap each other, so that while this age was winding down, the age to come was winding up. And that overlap period was the days of the Messiah. It was not a separate period tacked on to the end of this age or tacked on to the beginning of the age to come, but was in fact the overlap of those two ages. Jesus and the New Testament writers also did something else with this terminology that was different than the rabbis. Before Christ, the Jews talked about the age to come as merely future with no indications of its nearness. But Jesus and the New Testament writers add a little word in there. You'll notice inserted in parentheses, this age or the age about to come. That's that Greek word mello. That's what we see different. New Testament writers added in that word mello, indicating that the age to come is no longer just nebulously off in the future somewhere, but is in fact on the doorstep, about to be and about to come. And so that was one of the subtle changes, but nevertheless very significant changes that the New Testament added to this rabbinic terminology. The age to come is no longer just out there in the nebulous future, but is now declared to be about to arrive. It was now the age about to come. We want to focus mainly on this transition period called the days of the Messiah by the Jews. They called it the last days of this age. And so the days of the Messiah, in their terminology, would have been the final waning, winding down years of this age. It was indeed considered to be a transitionary stage between the ages. And that's why we have entitled our lesson, Between the Ages, a study of the transition period from AD 30 to AD 70. We want to look very closely at this transition period in order to discover what it accomplished, as well as what it implies for life in the eternal kingdom after AD 70. And we need to know what parts of the Old Testament doctrine and practice was done away with at 70 AD, and what parts of it continued to be applicable beyond AD 70. In other words, our concern here is on discovering what goes, what stays, and how do we know? We are talking about a significant covenantal change. And of course, the best way to do that is to look at the book of Acts. And so we're going to be spending some time in our lesson dealing with the book of Acts. Also, Jesus is teaching about the nature of the kingdom. Is another very rich source of information about what we would be doing, what life would be like, what would be true and applicable for us after AD 70. Remember, all of Jesus' parables, just about all of them, start out with the phrase, the kingdom is like unto. Well, what is the kingdom?